Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. From Peterson's, I'm Taylor Sienkiewicz, and you're listening to You Have a Cool Job, a podcast highlighting those who took their profession in a unique direction and what they did to get there. On this week's episode of You Have a Cool Job, we talk to someone who may be at your school assembly, graduation, or work event. Chris Natzke is an inspirational speaker and leadership coach, so it only seemed appropriate to me to ask what his inspiration is to inspire others.
It really starts all the way back, being a martial arts teacher and instructor for my entire adult career. One of the things I absolutely love is being in front of a room and inspiring others. And what this provides me to do is it allows me to take my message out to a much broader audience, and both younger and older audiences. So I do quite a bit of speaking with high school and college age students. I also do corporate speaking, etc. So for me, I love connecting with people. I love being able to share a message that inspires and motivates them. And that's why I really love what I do.
Okay, great. So I know your main goal then would be to motivate people when you're doing these speeches, but what are some of those specific goals that you target to like adults or youths or different groups of people?
Sure. Well, what I do when three or four of my key messages is I help people understand that everyone really has a vision for their life. And sometimes it gets a little clouded because we get caught into the day-to-day things. And so what I help them do is really understand that vision was implanted inside of them for a reason and to really give it life. And most of the time that's expressed in our careers, but it could be expressed in other ways as well. And so I happen to believe that if we are very clear about a vision and we get really clear about what we love to do and that we're really good at, and then we focus on serving others, and that's the perfect trifecta right there. So particularly when I'm speaking with youth, that's one of the messages that I'm trying to get across. And also that we're always going to have adversity as we're moving towards something that we want. And that's where most people get off track. Once they get beyond the idea of understanding what they want to do, what their vision is, then they don't really have a plan when the obstacles occur. And so I help them with that. And then finally, I'm a huge proponent of serving others. So I really think that our work is best when we have a high degree of service in it.
Right. So how did you come up with these topics that you wanted to teach people just through life experience?
Yeah, it is. So my background, Taylor, is martial arts, as you probably know. And so I've been a martial arts practitioner for over 45 years. And this is the story about how it all came about. I knew that I'd been doing a lot of public speaking, particularly in promoting my martial arts school when I owned that. So I spent my first 10 years out of college working in corporate sales, and then I left that, and then I spent 17 years owning a professional martial arts studio. So I had the corporate side of the business, and then I also had the entrepreneurial side of a career. And I was getting ready to test for my 7th degree black belt. This was back in 2008, and I was like, man, I want to do some kind of a talk where I integrate the qualities of martial art training and all that kind of stuff. And I created an essay that I wrote as my martial arts test requirement called The 7 Qualities of Black Belt Excellence. And I wrote that as my thesis for my 7th degree black belt test. And I also had it shared by my top students and my sons during the performance when I was doing my testing. And someone said, well, that's your keynote talk. And I said, I think it is. So that's really how it developed. It kind of developed from that whole thought of just bringing those two worlds together. And when I'm able to do that, I'm able to play a bigger game. So I felt there was a finite amount of people that I could impact through martial arts, and now I can do it on a much broader scale.
Okay, so you talk to people who maybe have no background in martial arts, but you use those same principles.
Absolutely. In fact, I absolutely enjoy doing that, and in fact, sometimes it's more enjoyable because they have no preconceived notions, right, of what I'm saying. But the concepts are universal, right? So it's really about, that high quality of vision, belief in self, moving through obstacles, and then being able to take action to serve. Those are universal principles. I just use martial arts as the metaphor when I'm doing my speaking.
Chris mentioned his jump from martial arts instructor to public speaker, but I wanted to back up and hear how he moved from the corporate world to the martial arts space in his career.
Well, I started my training back in the early 70s, and at the time there was a television show that was quite popular called Kung Fu. Okay. And so as a 10-year-old, I saw that show and begged my mom to let me go to my first class, and when I did, I absolutely fell in love. I felt like I came home, and that just started a career from there. And then about 3 years after that, I met a man that would change my life forever. In fact, he's still my instructor to this day, some 42 years later, and his name is Grandmaster J.K. Lee. And he was the one man that I had as a role model in my life at that point in time that had this tremendous balance of strength, power, as well as kindness and compassion and open-heartedness. And so he, during one of our training sessions, looked me directly in the eye and said, "I'm going to make you a champion." And I was like, oh my gosh, it's like the tablets just came down from the mountaintop, right? I totally believed him. But what he was doing is he was seeing greatness in me. He was claiming it for me. And I realized, later on that it wasn't just about being a champion in the ring. It was about being a champion in life. And that was always his message. But what I also realized from his example is that that was something I wanted to pay back to society. I wanted to be able to have people have that same feeling, because my belief is we are all working at our highest level of expression. We're expressing ourselves career-wise in our relationships, in our health and wellness, in our spirituality. When we're at that top level, the whole world gets up-leveled, right? Everybody gets up-leveled. Think about the last time you were around a person that was incredibly inspiring and really motivating and really on it in terms of their life. You got inspired to be better too, right? We all do. And so I think that if we're all at that level, we just raise the boat for everyone.
Okay. What a great athlete story. I love that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
So I know that obviously doing motivational speaking is rewarding because you get to impact these people, but what are some of those ways that you see that happening? Like what parts of that are most rewarding to you?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna give create a distinction here in terms of wording. Mm-hmm. And the term is often used motivational speaker, which I think is fine. But my intention is to be an inspirational speaker. And now what's the difference between that, you might think? Well, I heard this said years ago. A teacher said that motivation gets people moving in a short period of time, right? So someone's yelling at you, go, 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 go. You're motivated to go. But what inspiration does is it lights a flame inside of you that stays burning beyond that short period. It stays a lifetime. So it's my intention that when I'm working with an audience, that I'm inspiring them to a point where I'm not only talking about points, but I'm telling stories related to my life that they can relate to. And then we have that connection. And then they start to go, wow, I see the possibility in my life now, right? Mm-hmm. Because we've created a connection there. And so now they're inspired, not necessarily motivated, but they're inspired to keep moving forward and expand their life, expand their careers, expand their relationships. And that's really what my intention is.
Yeah, that's an important differentiator.
It is, right? Because, anyone can be motivated, mm-hmm. right? If I had $100 in my hand, I might motivate you to come, do 10 push-ups or something, but that's a short period of time. But inspiration lasts. And that's where we make a huge ripple effect in our world when we inspire people, and then it continues and continues and continues. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And then as far as the business of doing this inspirational speaking, how did you make this more of a career for yourself? Like how did you get to start talking in front of people regularly?
Right. Well, as I said, I really began my speaking when I was promoting my martial arts school.
Right.
So I was speaking to, I'm sure it was tens of thousands of kids, throughout that juncture of my life, where I would go into grade schools and I'd speak, and I had a program that I called Kindness Counts. And so what it was an anti-bullying program, a nonviolent conflict resolution program, where the students were inspired then to do 10 acts of kindness after I left. And my thought was that if I had 600 kids that I saw, say, in a day, and they all did 10 acts, that was an injection of 6,000 acts of kindness into a community. And that does nothing more than up-level a school, right? Just energetically. Because bullies, they won't thrive in an environment where there's tremendous kindness, because they're doing it because they're in pain. But if they're accepted and they're loved in a school environment, their tendency to bully will go down. So it started there. And then it just, I started getting feedback from people like, hey, you're pretty good at this. And I really enjoyed it. And so I started getting opportunities. And my initial foray into this was going to service organizations. So in the Denver metro area, for instance, there's like 400 plus service organizations, like a Rotary Club, an Optimist Club, a Kiwanis Club, and all these kinds of clubs. And they meet, there's several of them going on every day, both in the morning, noon, and evening. And they always need speakers. So I thought, if I've got an audience, I'm going to speak. And so that's how I started, is just honing my craft. And sometimes it was in front of 10 people, and sometimes it was in front of 100. It didn't matter. But I just started really developing my skills that way. I think what many people do when they want to speak and they want to start is they have a talk that they get scheduled, and they do it, but they don't work to schedule any others. And so they work a couple months, and then they do their talk, and then there's nothing else. And then it's like anything. If you don't practice, you don't get better. And when I coach people who want to be speakers, even before they have a talk developed, I tell them to book a talk. And they're like, what do you mean? I don't have it. I said, well, yeah, but if you book it, you'll have it ready. Right? If you book it, you'll have it ready by that day. And so when I started on this venture, I was still working through my talk, but I went out and I got a list of all these service organizations in Denver, and in 2 weeks, I booked 20 talks that were going to occur over the next 3 months. And so I had to be ready. I had to be ready, and it just took off from there.
Okay. So when you talk about booking these, is that a pretty simple process, or do you have to market yourself a lot?
You have to market yourself, and you have to be very persistent, and there's a lot of competition out there as well. And so, one of the things that I do when I'm having discussions with potential clients is, there's of course what I offer and what I'm able to bring, but I think it's also incredibly important to find out what event planners are looking for in a speaker. Because the way that you thrive in this business is you make the event planner look really good, right? You, of course, want to make an impact on the people you're speaking to, but if you want to, from a business standpoint, if you want to get continuously hired, what you have to do is make sure that event planner, you make them look like a hero. So what I always do is I have an interview process that I do where I get a good idea of, say, what the event themes are, the demographics of the audience, what are the main themes that they want presented, because it's just like parenting. Parents can say things to their kids over and over and over again, and kids won't resonate. And then an authority figure, someone they look up to will say it, and the kid's like, oh my gosh, of course that's the truth. The same thing happens in a corporate environment. So the bosses, the leaders are saying, they're communicating, they're putting a message through, and after a while it gets old. And then another guy comes in, or woman, and gives the same message basically in the same quality, but it comes from a different person with a different energy, and people will resonate with it. So I always work a lot to make sure that my message is consistent with the goals and aspirations they have in the organization.
Right. So what kind of events are you usually speaking at a lot? Is it, I know there's a couple of corporate ones, but do you do graduations, or is this?
I do. Like I said, I have talks that I give for school-age kids, and so I've been a commencement speaker. I go in and do the I call it Mind of a Champion for high school students as well, and I'll do both types of students. I do a lot of at-risk youth kids, and then I also do some of the higher achiever kids. And then corporately, like for instance, January I was with New York Life here in Denver. I'll be down in Dallas for a group in April, and I'll also be here in Denver in July with a group. I not only do keynote speaking, but what I've also done is I've taken the concepts that I teach and I put it into a board-breaking experience. So it's basically, breaking through the boardroom dilemma, right? So the audience members takes about 2 hours to move through, and I'll take their leadership teams or, a large group of people. I've done as many as 120 of this format, and I help them to identify a breakthrough that they want to have in their life or their career. Like, what's something that's really above the line that you'd really like to achieve? And then they also identify what have been or what are the limiting beliefs that have held them back. And they then write them on a board, like a 1-inch pine board that we would break in martial arts. And then I systematically take them through, how they can overcome those limiting beliefs. And then they have to come up in front of the room and actually break the board. And it's been amazing. The feedback that I've gotten from that, as well as just the look on people's faces once they do this. I've had numerous stories where, I had one guy who he decided he wanted to go to college. He had been incarcerated for years. And when he broke his board, it said he wanted to get his master's degree. And I ran into him at an event a month later, and he took me into his room. He had just relocated after being incarcerated into a halfway house. And he took me into his room to proudly show me that the only piece of picture memorabilia or anything that he had in his entire room was his board.
Oh, wow.
And I found out last May that he's right now the top of his class in his undergrad program. So those types of things are what get me going.
Definitely.
When it, like I said, when it stays with people.
Yeah, that was something else I wanted to ask you about is are you able to follow up with people a lot of times?
Yeah, it's not only follow-up. So there's a couple of ways that I do that. I'll always ask for letters of recommendation and or video testimonials from people. So I'll get those and have a library of those. And then I have a weekly blog that I send out. It's called the Mind of a Champion Tip of the Week. So I invite audience members to get on my mailing list. And so I'm constantly having contact with them either through email, my email blog, or a video blog that I do each week. And so I'll constantly get comments from them, and I send that out via LinkedIn, and I send it out via Instagram and all that kind of stuff. So I'm in contact with them constantly. And every once and again, I'll hear from someone I hadn't seen, or, I heard you speak 2 years ago. Would you come here and do this? So it's when you're in their consciousness, if you're, subtly in front of them, then I'm getting feedback on what's going on in their life too.
Clearly, Chris is also a writer.
I had one of my mentors say, writers speak and speakers write. So what I did about 5 years ago, I came out with my first book, and it's called Black Belt Leadership. And then I've also created an online education program right around that book. And then my next book that I'll be hopefully completing here in, I'll say by the first half of 2019, is those weekly blogs that I do. I have about 65 of those right now in the files, and I'm going to take those and edit those up a little bit, and that'll be my next book.
Oh, wow.
Since I'm writing each week, I might as well, reuse and repurpose some of that stuff I've done. At
the end of our conversation, Chris left us with a few more nuggets of inspiration.
I just love what I get to do, and there's a lot more positive that's going on in the world right now than we tend to hear about. And I'm always inspired with stories when I'm out and about, and people will come up and talk to me afterwards about, the great things that are happening in their life and what they're up to. And I guess, my one thing is the idea of my platform, which is called Mind of a Champion, is something adage from the martial arts, which is champions don't need to be told what to do. They just need to be reminded. And that's not only reminding and giving someone a reminder, but it's also, if you take that word remind and you hyphenate it, it's remind, meaning change your mind, change your thoughts, look at things from a different perspective. Because when you do that, what you'll notice is all the amazing things around you that you have, and you can build off that momentum to have what you want in your life.
Chris lives and breathes inspiration, and hopefully was able to inspire you too. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.